I don't like to use the term Skinwalker to describe the hellspawn that wandered the Appalachian Mountains. I say this because the only people that believe in skinwalkers are the ones who have actually seen them. I sure didn't believe in any such thing until about 2 weeks ago. The Appalachian Mountains had always been a place that I wanted to visit. The pictures on Google, on the internet, were enough for me. This place is fucking beautiful. I heard a few stories about skinwalkers that roam around the mountains during the night, which actually made it just a little bit more interesting. So I ended up saving some money. I rented a cabin, and I flew out here for a few weeks to experience the mountain lifestyle. The first few days were completely normal. I arrived and I felt completely fine. Hiking some surrounding trails is all that I can recall for the first 3 or 4 days. It was on that 5th day that everything began going to shit. The cabin that I had rented had 2 big floodlights facing the backyard, and every night a coyote would walk past my cabin, causing the lights to go off. I didn't think too much of it. On the 5th night of my stay, I was sitting in the living room watching some satellite TV. In the corner of my eye, I saw the floodlights flick on. I jumped up to go see my new coyote friend through the window. Let's just say that whatever caused my floodlights to turn on that night was not a fucking coyote. Its body looked completely normal. The legs, however, were extremely long and skinny, almost like 3 times longer than any normal coyote. And this thing was just staring at me. My fight or flight didn't kick in. All I could do was stare back into its empty eyes. This fucking creature then let out the loudest, most horrible scream I have ever heard. Then got even closer to the window. I turned around to grab my phone so I could call the police. As I was walking to the couch, the lights turned off. The glow of the old TV screen was the only thing lighting up the living room. I grabbed my phone and ran upstairs to my room. My first reaction was to hide in the closet, so I did just that. The closet doors had little slits in them, so I could kind of see what was going on outside. I picked up my phone and tried to call the police. However, there was only one issue. My phone was fucking dead. It was around this point that I heard knocking coming from my front door. The knocking continued for what felt like an hour. I had no idea what to do, so I just sat there, hoping that it would stop. And then, it eventually did stop. But shortly after, I heard the door open. No kicking the door in or anything. It just opened. That's when I started to cry. I could hear faint footsteps getting louder and faster as it went up the stairs. It eventually got to my room, where I thought I was dead for sure. I could hear it opening the drawers and messing with my bed sheets. I peered through one of the slits in the door, but I couldn't really see anything. That was until the creature put its disgusting, rotting face right up against the door. It was breathing so loud that it was hurting my ears. I pushed myself into a corner and used one of my jackets to cover me. It was my last option. I'm not sure how long I sat there, but it felt like an eternity. I eventually peeked out from behind my jacket to see some light coming through the doors. I stood up and looked out. It was daytime. I couldn't hear the creature anymore. I assumed that it got scared by the sunlight and left. I slowly opened my closet door. It was finally safe. Needless to say, I got the fuck out of there, and I'm never going back. I don't want to see my psychologist, because they won't believe me. They'll think that I'm crazy. Maybe that I'm insane. I'm not sure. All I know is that whenever the locals of the Appalachian Mountains talk about these things, they're not lying. I recently moved into a new apartment with my dog, Marbles. It's not a nice place by any means. However, it's the only option I had. I'm just now starting a new job, and I barely have enough money to cover rent, ramen, dog food, and of course, Netflix. So I moved to this small dirt cheap apartment on the outskirts of town because it's cheap and also because it's pet friendly. No, it's not the best thing, but it's only temporary. The apartment is small with only 3 rooms. The first room you enter is the kitchen living room with a hallway in the back. The door at the end of the hall leads to the bathroom, and the hallway is the door on the right side to the bedroom. I don't have anything or personal belongings, so the apartment is very bare. I never even bothered to decorate the place because I wasn't planning on staying here long. We've been in the apartment for a few weeks and everything seems fine. As we got comfy, Marbles took a liking to the couch in the living room. It wasn't a couch that belonged to me. It actually came with the apartment. Well, Marbles started sleeping on the couch at night. With that said, Marbles likes to get up and move around in the middle of the night. She would get up and come to the bedroom door and hope to get inside. I always sleep with the door closed, so she would stay to whine and paw at the door. Marbles had long nails that she hated getting cut, so you could hear her walking throughout the apartment if you were awake. After a few nights of this, I just started leaving the door open for her. From then on, she would come and get in the bed with me at all times of the night. This never bothered me. Many more weeks went by with nothing happening. However, one weekend, my Netflix session lasted a little bit longer than it normally does, and I was still up at around 2 a.m. in the morning. I was just wrapping up Stranger Things Season 2 when out of the corner of my eye, I saw it in the doorway to the hall. There was something peeking at me. I turned to look directly at it. It looked like the top half of a face, peeking from the left side of the doorway. The only thing I could see were 2 eyes, beady and black, staring at me. I was frozen, not sure if it was fear or shock stopping me from moving. I blinked, and it was still there. After a few more seconds, I started panicking and yelled out, "Who the fuck are you? Get out!" For a few more seconds, it kept staring, and then slowly began to pull away and out of view. Once I could no longer see it, it took a few moments to regain control of my body. Once I had, I jumped up and slammed the door, locking it. Marbles, who had been laying on the bed with me, was now sitting up and alert. I called the police and told them someone had broken into my apartment. After a while, I heard them knocking on the front door. Eventually, I mustered the courage to step out from the room and run to the front door. They investigated, and the landlord was called. No one was found in the apartment, and when the police had arrived, the front door was still locked from when I got home. There were no signs of breaking and entering, but I insisted that I saw someone. The police did one more sweep of the apartment before leaving, telling me that there was nothing more they could do. The landlord, to whom I must give credit, swapped out the locks the next day, giving me all new keys. He told me that it was possible that a previous renter still had a set of keys to the room and had possibly come in. The thought of that unnerved me, but the more I thought back on it, the less human the thing seemed to be. It took a few weeks and many sleepless nights to go back to normal, if you could call it that. I told myself that I could handle the stress, that we would only be here a little bit longer. During that time, I also bought a baseball bat, which I now kept beside my bed. Now, I still kept the door to the bedroom open at night, but only slightly open, so that Marbles could slip in or out. I didn't feel comfortable seeing the doorway where that thing had been, but one night, Marbles came in and hopped in the bed like she normally does. She settled down and rested her head on my thigh, which is very common. I had been asleep and never bothered to open my eyes. I started drifting back off to sleep when I heard a sound. It was the sound of the nails of marble as she walked. It came from the living room and was approaching the bedroom door. I was facing the side of the room with the door, and I opened my eyes, and Marbles was there, pushing the door open and coming in. A chill ran up my spine. Slowly, I looked over and down at the bed. It was there. The thing was resting its head on my thigh, looking right into my eyes. For a quick second, I got a look at it. It had a humanoid form, but it was impossibly inhuman. Its face was horrific, with those beady black eyes, long greasy black hair. Its body was elongated, and it looked as though it was made up of only bones with skin wrapped tightly around them. Its face then started to creep closer to mine, and I was finally able to move. I threw the blanket over the thing and jumped out of the bed, running to the front door. I could hear it scurrying behind me, along with Marbles running behind. When I got to the door, I turned to see both Marbles and this thing following. Marbles made it to the door first, and once she was out, I slammed the door shut. I heard and felt the thing slam against the door, scratching and banging against it. I could also hear its raspy breathing. Eventually, it all went quiet. My phone was still inside, but after a while, one of the neighbors opened the door after my crazy knocking. They phoned the police for me. The police weren't as friendly this time, but I told them that I had trapped the person inside my apartment. After a long search of the entire apartment, the police found nothing. I couldn't believe it. They scolded me and told me that if I called for this again, I would be arrested. I felt like I was going insane. Refusing to go back in alone, the landlord actually joined me while I packed up all my belongings. I wasn't staying there any longer. My parents had an extra room they offered me, and it was going to take a long time before I felt comfortable being alone again. I'm typing this all out from my parents' house, laying in the guest room. Well, a few paragraphs ago, I noticed something. Over in the corner is a closet with folding doors. It's slightly open, and in the crack of the doors, I can see two beady black eyes staring right at me. If the time stops at 1:09 a.m., roll over and pray that they think that you're asleep. If you're wondering who they are, well, that's the weird part. It's your family, or your roommate, or whoever you live with. I never heard of this happening before, so I'm not sure what I can really do about it, other than pretend I'm sleeping, of course. That's the only thing that really seems to keep them docile. Let me explain what's been happening in a little more detail. This has been going on for the past 3 nights now. I didn't really think too much of it the first night, because, honestly, I thought my family was pulling some prank on me. That is, until last night, when I was attacked by my own wife. The first night was a pretty early night for my wife Kelsey, and my twin boys Eric and Aaron. All of us were out cold by 9 p.m. We had a pretty long day of splitting wood to stock up for the upcoming winter. That night, I woke up to an odd silence in the house, like everyone had left, and I was alone in the house. I grabbed my phone and checked the time. It was 1:09 a.m. I looked over just to check if my wife was still asleep, and when I found the bed empty, I sat up and looked around. The house was pitch black other than the hall light by my boy's room that we left on, and with that light, I could see 3 shadows cast along the hallway wall as my bedroom was left open. Kelsey? I called out. That's when I saw the 3 shadows twitch at the sound of my voice, like they were startled. Kels, I called just a bit louder. This time, a shiver went down my spine as all three heads of the shadows looked in my direction. What the fuck? I whispered to myself, tossing the blankets off from me as I got up to investigate. I tiptoed to my door with a feeling of unease growing in the pit of my stomach. Once I got to the door, I peeked around and was pretty creeped out at what I saw. Kelsey and the boys were all standing still, with their bodies turned towards the boys' room. Their necks, however, were straining to stare directly at me. Huge smiles that looked painful to maintain were on all of their faces. What the hell are you guys doing? I asked with a chuckle, thinking they were playing a joke on me. Now that I think back at it, it doesn't even make much sense thinking they were joking. After all, why would they get up in the middle of the night for that, when there's no guarantee that I would even wake up? Their bodies made a twitchy, unnatural movement at the sound of my voice, which made me jump back in surprise. This was when I really started to think something might be wrong. A feeling of dread washed over me, and I began to sweat. Then, the sound of the clock on the microwave began to beep, and as it rang through the house, it made me jump in the air as I let out a startled yelp. My boys turned instantly and walked back into their room, Kelsey doing the same. Her smile disappeared and she walked by me like a zombie and crawled back in bed, snoring as if she were sleeping the whole time. Confused as hell, I walked back to my side of the bed and checked the time on my phone. What the fuck? I said to myself as I noticed the time. 1:10 a.m. No way that only a minute had passed since I first woke up. It had to have been at a very minimum of 5 minutes. Still though, I shook it off and got back into bed, deciding to bring it up to Kelsey in the morning. The next morning I woke up and everything was back to normal. I could hear the boys playing in the living room and smell bacon and eggs as Kelsey cooked breakfast. I got up and walked out with a smile as I remembered their little joke from the night before. "Good morning, pranksters," I said with a laugh. They all stared at me with a confused look on their faces. "Huh?" my wife finally said. "Last night, all of you standing in the hallway smiling at me. Gotta admit it was a good one. It sure creeped me out a little bit though," I said, shaking my head. "Ryan, don't even joke like that. You know those creepy smiling people stories freak me out," Kelsey scolded. "Hey, you're the one trying to freak me out in the middle of the night," I said. "By the way, how in the hell did you get the phones to stop at 109? That was a good touch." My whole family was looking at me like I was a nut job. Then, they all started shouting it wasn't funny and that I was scaring them. I was shocked. I didn't know if they were still in on the joke, or if somehow they had all been sleepwalking. That wouldn't explain the time though. "Alright y'all," I shouted. "I must have been having a damn dream. Don't freak out on me, shit." I turned and walked back into the room even more confused than ever. I knew I wasn't dreaming. Were they serious about their little prank? Or did they not actually remember? Either way, I figured I would settle it that night. I would simply record them with my phone if they try to do it again. That's gonna ruin their joke pretty quick. Satisfied with my plan, I went about my day. The boys helped me split more wood, while Kelsey did some running in town. Before I knew it, it was nighttime again, and we were all in bed. I made sure to have my phone charged and right next to me, ready to catch them in the act. Once again, I woke up hours later, and that same eerie silence filled the house. This time, my adrenaline started pumping as the feeling of dread hit me like a ton of bricks. I grabbed my phone and lit the screen up. 1:09 a.m. I tried to switch it to record, but my phone was frozen. "Fuck," I yelled. I looked over to the hall and saw the same shadows as the night before, but this time a little bit closer. My blood ran cold as I noticed out of the corner of my eye that the TV was left on, but the picture was frozen. It seemed that all electronics were frozen or something, adding to the creepy feeling that was engulfing my body. I got up once again and tiptoed to the door. I peeked my head around, and I had to cover my mouth to quiet a scream. Kelsey and the boys were standing facing me directly this time. Only somehow, their smiles even bigger than before. And now that they were a good 5 feet closer, I could see just how wide open and bloodshot their eyes were. When I moved my hand to cover my mouth, all three of them took a giant step towards me. Naturally, I took a step back. They mimicked with another huge step. This time, since Kelsey was bigger than the boys, she stepped ahead. She was now maybe 3 to 5 feet away, her eyes opening even wider as she looked extremely excited. I turned around to jump back in bed, and as I did, I heard loud footsteps as they gave chase. That's when I felt huge blows hit my back, a lot stronger than any of them should be able to inflict. "What the fuck, y'all?" I shouted as my back started to hurt from the impact. I was now in bed and I yanked the covers over my head. It was childish, I know, but hey, I wasn't about to strike my wife. Thankfully, as I lay still, the blow stopped, and I heard heavy breathing from what I assumed was Kelsey. Only it sounded way too deep and raspy. Then, the breathing stopped altogether, and silence filled the room.
"I know you're not asleep,"
she whispered so fast I barely made out what she said. Just then, the beeping of the microwave filled the house, and the TV resumed. I heard the sound of soft footsteps leave the room as the boys went back to their rooms, followed by pressure next to me in bed as Kelsey climbed back under the covers. I quickly grabbed my phone and checked the time. 1:10 a.m. This doesn't make any fucking sense. I did my best to go back to sleep, but needless to say, I didn't sleep much. I tossed and turned as I tried to figure out what the fuck was happening. I tried to figure out what steps to take next. The only thing I could think of was to pretend that I was asleep next time, since my lack of movement seemed to stop the blows. If they thought I was asleep altogether, maybe they would just stand creeping in the hallway. It was worth a shot, I guess. I'll update tomorrow and let you guys know how last night went for me. It was still extremely scary, but hey, I didn't get attacked, so that's a start, right? I got another plan for tonight too, but I'll just put that in the update tomorrow. Wish me luck, and if anyone's got any idea as what to do here, please feel free to help me. This is my first post, and it's a true story. I was living in Oklahoma with my mother at a small lake house, and I'm around 10 or 11 at this time. I'm sleeping in my bedroom when I randomly wake up for no reason. This was not normal for me, and I felt very uneasy. The only sound I could hear was my mother snoring in the next room. I turned over and tried to go back to sleep, but my need to use the bathroom was growing, so I forced myself to head that way. The bathroom is on the other side of the house, around a corner, and past the kitchen, and finally down a long hallway on the right. So after I made the trip and finished my business, I flipped off the light switch and started heading back to bed. That's when I heard the distant click of the light switch, and I saw the glow of the bathroom light in the hallway. Terrified, I slowly turned around just to witness the light in the bathroom start clicking on and off. Finally, it turned completely off. In the dark of the hallway, my eyes began to make out a white shape near the end of the hall. It was around my size and crouched to the floor. At this point, I'm frozen to the spot as my mind begins realizing that no one else is home except for my mom and myself. Then, this white figure began to whisper in a quiet voice of a man,
Help me. I'm lost.
I remember wanting to scream for my mom, but I couldn't, and instead, I barely said no before this thing starts running at me on what sounded like all fours. I quickly ran through the kitchen and around the corner before running to my sleeping mother, shaking her awake. I remember saying, "It's coming, Mom, it's coming," and my mother's eyes going from dazed to alert in an instant. She asked me what was going on, and I saw her eyes look over my shoulder before she screamed. Remembering her scream still makes my blood run cold. Never had I heard pure fear like that in my life, even to this day. She then grabs me by the arms and pulls me into my room and slams the door shut. She holds me in her arms with her back pressed against the door as we listen. It sounded like this thing was running around in circles in the kitchen. We could hear hands and feet slapping against the tile. The kitchen had a sliding glass door to the outside, which sounded like it was thrown open then slammed. We sat there horrified until daybreak. I was sent to my grandmother's in the next town for a while after that, and never set foot in that house again. Years later, my mother said she went walking around the property after the incident and came across a small burial site with 3 headstones that each belonged to children from the early 1900s. It freaks me out because what I heard that night was a man's voice, but it was very unnatural. My mom still won't tell me what she saw behind me and what it was that made her scream. She tells me that she's afraid it will know that we're talking about it and it will come back. This is the first of many weird things that have happened in my life. You know that experiment where you stare into the mirror at your own eyes and hold the gaze until you start seeing your face go all weird? If you haven't, please don't try it out. I'm begging and warning you. I repeat, don't try it. I hope that by the end of you reading this, I have convinced you as to why you should not try it. I love doing weird experiments that gave me a twisted view of reality. You know, as a 22-year-old that just got stuck in a 9-to-5 job, I was desperately trying to change things up. I didn't want to do drugs, so I tried experiments like the one above. When I first read about this experiment in the mirror, I thought it was amazing. It was actually pretty cool to see things change right before your eyes. I remember one specific time when my face got so warped, it no longer looked like me. It didn't even look human. I was actually thrilled. So I tried doing this experiment under different lights, like a bright light, red light, dim light, and last, the candle light, just to see the effects of each light. You don't realize how just one single action could completely turn your life around. Like not being able to answer questions in your chemistry exam, which made me get a C for that course. As a result, I could not get into medical science, which actually changed my degree completely, and as a result, even my job. My life could have been completely different if I had gotten into medical school. Anyways, the point is, it's always the smallest of things that can have a major impact. And for me, it was 3 simple lit candles. So one day I decided to try out the experiment in candlelight. Strange. This time I felt scared. Don't ignore your gut feeling. Honestly, it's like a second brain. In fact, I think studies have proved it. So I felt quite strange, but I decided to go ahead anyways. I lit up 3 candles, enough to illuminate just my face. I started the experiment as usual, and stared into my eyes. 20 seconds had passed, and instead of my face changing, as usual, it remained the same. I decided to continue for longer, despite the sensation of unease. Then, my face started changing, slowly and clearly. My eyes came too close to each other. It had become red. I didn't realize I had been smiling, but I could see myself smiling wide. It was one of those smiles where you can see the gums in your teeth. They looked so red. I got so freaked out and closed my eyes. When I opened them, just for a split second, I saw that warped image of myself again. I thought it must have been one of those images that are sort of retained in your memory and then played after. Like when you see a negative image on your computer screen, and then when you see a white wall, you see the image. I brushed it off and did not see myself in the mirror the whole day. But that night, I decided to brush my hair in front of my mirror, and I swear, for a second, I saw my twisted version standing behind me with that same smile. I quickly turned around, almost screaming, but I didn't see anything, thankfully. After that, I didn't see anything strange for a while. I did end up stopping that stupid experiment. Then, after a while, at my friend's house, I saw it. I saw it when I was drying some silver pots, and I saw my own face, sort of out of sight. But then, I also saw that warped image of myself. I almost dropped my pot. From then on, this image made a daily appearance on any reflective surface. Windows at work, puddles on the street, bathroom mirrors, laptop reflection. If it reflected an image, that warped image of myself would make an appearance. If you're wondering how I kept my sanity, well, to be honest, I'm not sure. I stopped looking at myself in the mirror and got rid of all reflective things in my house and tried staying away from reflective things. I got my best friend to come stay with me, telling her that I was just feeling lonely. Never did I think something I was so familiar with, like my face, myself, would scare me. Every time I look at my hands or body, I looked at it for just a second longer, just to make sure I know it's me. You know the phrase, I know it like it's the back of my hand. That's pretty stupid, because until this time, I had not paid much attention to the back of my hand, and now, every time that I do, I question if it's the same hands I saw the last time. I needed to share this information with a person, someone who is smart and could comfort me. Even though I'm not very religious, I always enjoy going to temples, as I'm Hindu. I found it very safe. I had become quite close with the priest there over the years, and he would always tell me wonderful practical stories about life and other important lessons. So I decided that I would tell him of my strange experience. I met him on a Tuesday night, and because Tuesdays are the quietest, so I thought it would be a good idea. After the routine of praying, I asked if I could share with him something. He was more than happy to listen. For someone who is always calm, I did not expect his reaction. The minute I told him about the reflection, his face was looking extremely worried, and he quickly looked away from me. Once I finished telling him the story, he took the golden jug of holy water and literally emptied it on me right then and there. Usually priests give a drop of that water with a little golden spoon, not empty the entire contents of water onto you. Before I could say anything, he went and handed me a lemon without looking at me again, along with some other herbs, and told me to take them with me. He told me to stay away from reflections and told me to come back next week. When I tried to talk, he's still not looking at me. He told me to leave and come back next week. You can imagine how scary that must have been. A priest freaking out. That really fucked me up. So guys, here I am. I'm writing this down in the hopes that someone else out there has had a similar experience or could provide some help or some sort of comfort, and I could really use the help, because now this warped image that used to appear in reflections, I saw it yesterday at work, not on a reflection, but standing near my friend's desk. I was the first to notice an extra person had joined our group. I counted 6 of us sitting around the campfire, but I knew we had left home with 5. The 6th person had joined us somewhere along the way, but where and when exactly, I could not be sure. All the glowing faces looked familiar, like I had known them all for a lifetime. That was why it took so long to find the man out of place. I had to go through the faces one by one. I went through my history with them, recounting how I met them, how I knew them. I fit each one into my memories like puzzle pieces. First, there was Mark. He was sitting next to Sarah, talking with her as always. I met Mark and Sarah 6 years ago in the 10th grade. Mark and I played wide receiver together on the school football team. Sarah was a cheerleader, and Mark always had a thing for her. The 3 of us started hanging out after games, Mark flirting non-stop, and Sarah always hilariously rebuking him after a while. Then there was Ben. We had been best friends since the 1st grade, ever since we bumped heads playing tag during recess. He had his arm around his longtime girlfriend, Justine. She started at our school when she moved from Chicago in the 7th grade. Ben sat next to her in class, and soon she became a part of our group at that time. She was quiet and shy when she first arrived, but once we got to know her, she opened up. She was one of the coolest and nicest people you could ever get to meet. She had also become close with Sarah in the past few years. And then there was the 6th face, the piece that did not fit. I stared at him, and his name escaped me. That is, if I ever had it in my memory banks in the first place. He looked familiar, but I could not place him in my memories. But why, if I recognized him? Why could I not remember his name? Why did he sit among us, acting as if he belonged here? He stared at Mark and Sarah as they chatted. He started laughing when they would laugh, smile when they smiled. I couldn't figure it out. The question burned in my head. How had he, a stranger, joined our little group without any of us noticing something amiss? "Hey, Porter," Ben pulled me from my thoughts. "Your head up in the clouds or something?" I was just telling Justine about our 5th grade teacher. "What was his name again?" "Mr. Smith," I said. "Oh yeah, Mr. Smith. I was telling Justine how you could rile that guy up like nobody else could. Remember that one time you gave your homework printed in yellow ink?" Ben and Justine laughed. "Yeah, I remember," I said. I can still see the steam coming out of his ears. They laughed again, and I semi-joined in. When I glanced the strange man's way, he was watching us, grinning, just watching, part of the reason he had flown under the radar. I was struck with the sense that he was studying us. My skin started to crawl. Ben drained his beer and threw the empty can in the cooler. "Well, I gotta take a leak," he said, and walked into the woods, swallowed up by the darkness. "You really know how to push people's buttons when you want to, huh?" Justine said. I shrugged. I was having trouble focusing on the conversation. The weight of the situation, the reality of it. was starting to hit me. A strange man had attached himself to our group unnoticed, and who the fuck knew what his motivations were? Questions raced through my mind, none I could answer. How had no one else noticed yet? Why had it taken me so long to notice? Was I going insane? Am I forgetting things and forgot this one friend of ours? The strange man then stood with jerkiness. "I gotta take a leak," he said. It was the first time I heard him speak. He spoke in a strange way. It sounded as if he had to force the words from his throat. He walked with an awkward gait, and like Ben, disappeared behind the dark veil of the trees. No one else flinched. Justine kept talking. "I always loved the long relationship you and Ben have. It was so hard moving cities and leaving all my old friends behind. I mean, I can't complain too much. I wouldn't have met Ben and all you guys otherwise." "Justine, don't you see what's going on here?" "Huh? You're telling me you haven't noticed?" "Notice what, Porter? What are you talking about? Who was that guy?" I gestured to the vacated spot the strange man left behind. "Oh, him? He's, what's his name?" She trailed off. She frowned into the fire. I could see her mind ticking over, and her eyes twinkle with concern. I knew I wasn't going crazy. "I don't know," she said. "Who is it?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out." We stared at each other. "Maybe..." Justine was cut off. An ear-piercing screech came from the woods. It sounded like a shrill, injured cat. A large cat. The sound split in the air and cut our conversations short. A blanket of silence fell over the four of us. Only the crackling campfire persisted. The woods were still and quiet. "The fuck was that?" Mark broke the silence. "I don't know," Sarah said. "I have never quite heard an animal like that before." "Sounded like some fucked up mountain lion," Justine said. "Have you ever heard anything like that before?" I shook my head. My fingers tingled with adrenaline. Ben was still in the woods, and the strange man was out there with them. Dread filled my gut. "There's no mountain lions out here," Mark said. "Most likely an elk. They can make some creepy sounds." Sarah agreed. Justine bit her lip and scanned the woods. "It's okay. I think Mark's right," I said to her, but I wasn't sure I believed it. Mark and Sarah had started up their conversation again when the strange man came out of the woods. They paid him no mind. I was hoping something would have triggered in them by now, but they were oblivious. The strange man took a beer from the cooler. He fumbled with it, struggling with the tab. It was as if he had never opened the can before. When he finally got it open, he sat, beer in hand, and continued to watch Mark and Sarah, a thin smile on his face. He never did take a sip. I watched them from across the campfire, his head wavering behind the heat. I touched on what made me uneasy about this strange man, aside from the fact that he had managed to infiltrate our group without any of us noticing for a long time. He moved with jerkiness and awkwardness, like a newborn animal. Nothing he did was well practiced. It made everything he did look like an act, an imitation. I didn't make the connection at the time, but I should have seen this man was not quite human. But at the moment I wasn't sure what to think. I guess I just thought he was a freak. I considered calling him out, then and there. I wanted to ask him just what the fuck he was doing, but I'll admit, I was a little scared. I had visions of this guy being some horrific serial killer, and I didn't know how dangerous he was, or if he was armed. I didn't want to push him into doing something drastic that got all of us killed. As time went by without any sign of Ben, I became convinced the strange man had done something to him. I watched him plan and marking his next target. Anger sprouted from my fear, and I started to see red. I needed to stop him. We used an axe to chop firewood for our campfire, and it was leaning against my seat. This man was dangerous. I was sure of it. I convinced myself I needed to do something before another one of us was next. I clutched at the axe's handle. Justine touched my arm. "Porter, where's Ben? I'm getting nervous." "It's okay," I lied, patting her hand. "I'm sure everything is okay." I stood with the axe in hand. "I'm gonna go get some more firewood," I announced, more awkward than I hoped. Okay, dude," Mark said. "Porter?" Justine's voice. Speaking up was a mistake. I had drawn the attention of the strange man. I walked past him, trying to act as nonchalant as possible, but I was never a good actor. He watched me the whole way. He kept his glare on me as I reached the area of the woods, and as he looked back, his head rotated around an unnatural distance. That was enough to chill my spine. I was hoping he would turn around to look away and give me an opening, but he never did. I'm not exactly sure what happened next. I never saw him stand up and walk over to me. I never even saw him move a single muscle. But just like that, in an instant, he was standing in front of me, inches away from my face. It was as if he had teleported. A metallic smell stung my nose. The strange man stunk of blood and copper. The axe trembled in my hand. Any thought of actually using it fled my mind. I locked into place, my skin covered in goosebumps. Power radiated off of him. He spoke to me.
"Get some firewood,"
he said in his forced tone, and he smiled wide. At that moment, Ben emerged from the woods. "Ben," Justine cried. "Jesus," Ben said as Justine squeezed him. "Did you guys hear that cat thing?" "We think it was an elk," Mark said. "Where were you? Why did you take so long?" Justine asked. "I guess I wandered too far off, and I lost sight of the campfire. Took me a bit to find my way back. For a second I thought I was going to have to freeze my ass off out there alone tonight." The relief washed over my body like a wave, crashing into my muscles. I felt each one relax. At least Ben was safe. I looked for the strange man, but he was gone. He somehow slinked away while I was distracted. He was good at going undetected when he wanted to. My thoughts turned to getting out of there. Even though Ben was unharmed, that guy was still trouble. I started back towards the group and caught the middle of their conversation. "Yeah, who was that guy?" Ben said. "I thought he was with you guys," Sarah said. "Yeah, isn't he your friend?" Mark added. "I thought he drove over with you three." No," Ben said. "I don't know him." The panic spread over everyone's faces. They were finally feeling what I was feeling. The realization had set in. "We need to get out of here," I said, "before he comes back." "Yes, please," Justine said. "We have to leave now. That guy was a freak, right, Porter?" I explained to them how I noticed he was the odd man out when we were sitting around the campfire. I explained the odd behavior, and they all agreed the guy was strange and possibly dangerous. None of us could pinpoint exactly when he had joined the group. He had slipped unnoticed and unaccounted for. It was strange. We packed our tents in record time. We trekked the 15 minutes to our vehicles through dark woods, flashlights in hand. We heard the screech of the elk again, if it was an elk, which I had my doubts about now, and we took some comfort from the fact it sounded further away. Even so, We picked up our pace for the final stretch of the walk. I felt like I could finally relax behind the wheel and lock doors of my SUV. Justine and Ben sat in the back, while Mark and Sarah followed behind us in Mark's old beaten-up vehicle. We were heading out of the woodland and were planning to shack up in a motel for the night before heading home in the morning. I thought we were free and clear. We worked our way around the dark roads that snaked through woods. I let a smile open up my face when we finally reached the exit road. It was an arrow-straight stretch of asphalt that split through the last few miles of woodland. I pressed on the gas. I couldn't wait to get the hell out of the woods, and I think Mark was feeling the same way because he sat close on my rear bumper. I remember thinking, at least we'll have a strange tale to tell after all this. I didn't think it was about to turn into a horror story. The trees and the dashed lines on the road blurred past us. My headlights reached out for the endless road, and my meter needled its way towards 100 miles per hour. I don't know what possessed me to go that fast, and I wish Mark hadn't followed my lead. It was a mistake. The strange man appeared from behind a tree. He walked into the middle of my lane. I slammed the brakes, but it was too late. The next sequence of events happened so fast it played like a slideshow in my mind. The tires screeched and there was a smell of burning rubber. The strange man folded over my vehicle and got sent flying down the road. He skated across the pavement on his back, moving with such speed it looked like he was gliding on ice. More tires screeching. Mark flew past in the opposite lane, fishtailing. He fought it, and for a moment I thought he had it saved, but the vehicle hooked right into the trees. The sickening sound of crunching metal sounded in the air. Mark's car slammed into a tree, driver's side first, sending fragments of glass and metal flying. The car bounded off one tree and into another. The front passenger side impacted this time. The front light exploded, and the passenger side cavity caved in, sending a wheel bounding into the woods. The crumpled heap of a car came to a rest. Justine was the first out the door, crying out Sarah's name. Ben went after her, and I followed after him. Everything felt surreal as shock coursed through my body. It was as if I was watching through a screen. I floated over the asphalt as Justine and Ben sprinted towards the streaming wreckage. The crash scene dimly lit by my SUV's one remaining headlight. There are two screams I'll never forget. They imprinted themselves on my brain, and I'm gonna hear their echoes at night forever. The first one I heard was when I was 13. It came from my mother. It flooded the house, splashing off the walls. I ran out of my room to see her crumple at the front door, with two police officers standing by. They had notified her that her eldest son, my brother, had died. The second came from Justine when she saw what was waiting for us in the vehicle. Mark was unrecognizable. He was a shattered mess of bone, skin, and blood, blended and intertwined with the crumpled steel. Sarah was blinking slowly, her breathing labored, her one arm shattered, broken in too many pieces to count. Her legs crushed at knees from the front of the vehicle, which crumpled back into her leg space. Her legs would have been flat if I could see them. Justine turned away and fell to her knees, with her face buried in her hands. Ben tried to comfort her, but he had to turn away and throw up on the side of the road. I pulled out my phone and struggled to dial 911. With my fingers shaking, I kept pressing the wrong numbers. My voice was small and distant as I explained what happened to the operator. She told me to stay on the line, but as I looked down the road, I dropped my phone. The strange man was standing there. His grin reached from ear to ear, showing a grandstand of his teeth. his shoulders shrugged up and down as if he was laughing. In fact, the fucker was laughing. If I were not in shock, I would have gone after him right there and then. I would have torn his heart, if he has one, right from its chest. But all I could do was stare, struggling to keep the tears behind my eyes. The strange man started for the woods. I watched them go, and I watched them change. I saw it. I know I did. This was no illusion, no trick of the mind. This was real. I saw him. Shapeshift. I saw. It's true. Form. We were not dealing with something human that night. After countless hours of research, I believe I saw what others have called the goat man. Its horns were sticking out, uneven from its head, with rows of sharp teeth, and walking upright, like a man, with an awkward gait. It vanished into the shrouded woods. It's been 8 months since that night. I only seen my friends a handful of times since then. Our relationships have shattered and are left in ruin. All we are now to each other is a stark reminder of that night. Mark is dead. Sarah survived, but as a triple amputee. Justine and Ben broke up. And here I am, rugged with a scraggly beard and hair that has been uncut, after spending every sleepless night researching this monster I saw that night, the goat man. I'm going back to those woods. I'm coming for the goat man, and I'm not stopping until one of us is dead. I love camping, but after my most recent trip, I don't think it will ever be the same. I set up my tent on nice, flat ground and collected some wood for a fire. The night came with all its nightly sounds, and I relaxed at the owls and chirping crickets. Even better was the fact that no one else was around. Hell, it was subtle. I almost missed it. The voice came from deep within the woods, and for a moment, I didn't believe what I was hearing. It sounded almost like a female, but strange enough, I just couldn't tell. Please help. It continued. I shined my flashlight between the bushes and walked around. To be completely honest, even as a grown man, I was paralyzed with fear. So, I did the responsible thing and called the local police. That's when things went from being odd to very, very weird. The police actually told me to ignore it. I explained to them that someone could be injured and maybe needed medical attention, but they assured me otherwise. When I kept pushing and asked why, they told me, "Sir, if you ever hear that voice again, ignore it, do not respond, and do not approach." Well, I did hear it again, but I didn't ignore it. It was almost midnight when I heard the voice a second time. I awoke to someone whispering, "Help," and it sounded like she was just outside my tent. I went outside to check and no one was there, but the voice continued from a distance. "Help, please." Again, I grabbed my flashlight and looked around the area I was camping. I was too afraid to follow the voice into the woods, especially since the authorities themselves avoided it. But I struggled morally, trying to decide whether I should go and help this person or listen to the police, who were concerned for my safety. But then, I heard another, different voice. This other voice, which also seemed to be coming from the woods, was an octave lower. Unlike the first one, which cried for help, This one was loud and demanding.
Quiet.
The other voice demanded.
No one's going to help you.
Once I heard that, I was pretty sure someone was in trouble, so I called the police again. When I informed them about a second voice coming from the woods, they seemed even more concerned. They told me that I should pack up my things and leave the campsite immediately. They said that hearing the second, more manly voice meant that it was getting desperate. They also said that the two voices were coming from the same person. That part was bizarre and confused me, to say the least. It was at this point I dismissed the police in that area as crazy, but not before telling them off. I got angry. I told them that if they didn't get down here to come and check it out, then I would do it myself. I said that a woman could be in serious trouble and that it was their job to help her, but they still refused to come. All they kept repeating to me over the phone was, "Do not enter the woods, sir." They actually seemed more afraid than I was. Once I hung up the phone, I heard the voices again. A gentle, "Please, somebody help me." And then a growling,
Quiet. No one's coming.
It was a little past midnight at that point. I couldn't live with myself knowing that I had the chance to save someone's life, but instead became a coward. So I grabbed some things and ventured into the woods. When I entered the woods, the voices ceased. Just like that. No cries, no whispers, and no commands. Even the owls and crickets went away. Nothing but dancing leaves and creaking tree branches. I stopped walking and looked around, a full 360 degrees. "Hello? Anyone here?" I called out. Nothing. "I'm here to help," I continued. "Where are you? Are you okay?" Still, nothing. I thought of calling the police again, then chuckled to myself. I found it strange, but somewhat comforting that I didn't find anyone out there. Regardless, I was still creeped out, so I packed my things and finally left the campsite. I didn't know why the police, of all people, were so afraid. Worst case, someone was in actual danger, and we all failed them. To be honest though, when I heard the voice the very first time, I did think it was a joke. When I heard it the second time, along with that other voice, I became a bit more concerned. And same with the third time I heard it in the woods. However, when I heard it again, for the fourth time, a week after I left the campsite, coming from inside my own house, I became very, very concerned. When I was 23, I had a security gig at a dairy farm in Ohio. It was a modest place, only holding a few dozen cows at any given time. My then co-worker, a 34-year-old recovering meth addict named Corey, had just been fired for letting a cow go missing on his watch. An offense that would get you fired in every sense of the word. For starters, Corey was insane. By the time we met, he was seriously addicted to all kinds of drugs, and it rendered him virtually schizophrenic. Long nights were spent with him during my training period. He would tell me about the CIA and how they were out to get him. He was convinced that they were broadcasting thoughts into his head, and that they would stop at nothing to ruin his life. More than once, I would catch him glancing over his shoulder or peeking out of windows with a dumb look on his face, hoping to catch a glimpse of whoever was following him. That's the type of person that Corey was. Each of our cows had an ear tag labeled with a number. At 8 p.m., they were each to be guided into their own respective stalls and locked in for the night. Padlocks became the norm after an incident with local kids a few years earlier. In the mornings, we would have to carry around a clipboard containing each lock combination and individually release each one. It was the most annoying way to start the day, but the cows were more secure that way. That's what made Corey's story so unbelievable. He had claimed that the previous night, cow number 29 had been locked away in her stall along with the others. He told us that the only thing out of the ordinary that night was a bat stuck in the rafters that he planned to deal with in the morning. In order for his claim to be true, an intruder would have unlocked the barn with a set of keys, unlocked 29's stall with the correct combination, then reset the locks and leave undetected. Either that or they picked up a 1,600-pound animal and leaped through a window. Considering Corey's nasty habit of abandoning his duties in order to twitch and hallucinate in the corner, a small part of me believed that some two-bit thief might have been able to get one over him. My boss, however, a 50-year-old hothead, concluded that Corey must have been involved with the cow's disappearance and kicked them to the curb. With nobody else to fill his position, my boss had offered to pay me extra for each of his duties that I could complete until we received a new hire. Naturally, I agreed. I would be heading back to school in a few weeks and needed all the money I could get. My first night back at work began normally. Since I would now be doing the work of 2 security guards, I would arrive early to get a head start on Corey's checklist. I started out by sweeping out the barn. Farmhands try to keep the TMR in a long pile just in front of the stall door so the cows could eat throughout the night, but that shit practically painted the floor by the time I got there. Midway through, I noticed something reflective in the corner of the barn. I swept a loose bit of corn and hay over it to investigate. On the floor before me was a neon yellow ear tag, and I picked it up to examine it. 29. Next to 29's ear tag were the skeletal remains of a bat. I guess that was just another thing that Corey never got around to dealing with. I swept up the bones along with the rest of the barn. By the time I finished, it was already 8 p.m. I made my way out to the fields, and one at a time, I guided each cow to its assigned stall. I got through about 10 or so before I noticed something strange. Across the field, about 50 meters away from everything else and all the others, was a cow, alone. It faced away from me, seemingly transfixed on a nearby cornfield. Seeing a cow on its own is nothing strange, as they sometimes need personal space the same way as people do. What was strange, though, was the way that her tail stuck straight out from behind her, unwavering. She stood as if she were afraid to slip, with her feet planted far apart. Perhaps the strangest of all, her head appeared to be tilted at a 90-degree angle. I wasn't eager to tell my boss. They had already put down so many sick cows before, but losing 2 in the matter of a week might have been enough to send them over the edge. That's when I decided to save that cow for last, as I continued to guide the rest of them inside for the night. Being in charge of twice the amount of cows I was used to was time-consuming. It took me nearly an hour to round them up. By the time I locked number 36 for the night, it was 9 o'clock. I should have been making my rounds by then, especially given the circumstances. I just had that last cow to deal with. When contemplating how long it was going to take me to unlock each cow in the morning, I realized something that made my blood run cold. The only stall left empty was number 29. I shuffled to the field, and surely enough, she was there. She hadn't moved an inch since I started the process of moving them. I approached her slowly. It was surreal seeing a creature frozen in such an odd position. As I came up on her, I could hear a definite, but muffled, chittering. It was unlike any noise I had ever heard from a cow. What the fuck did you eat? I thought to myself. I whistled to the cow before approaching her to avoid scaring her. On a dime, the chittering ceased. The cow's left ear rose to face the sky and began to oscillate like the periscope of a submarine. I could tell that moving this one would be a challenge. I rubbed her back, attempting to calm her down. Bonding is key when establishing any sort of relationship with an animal. I had never interacted with 29 before, so we were unfamiliar with each other. Her skin felt bizarre, like clay with hide draped over it. I walked around to see her face. Her eyes were peeled open, darting around. Her mouth hung open and drooped to the side. I examined her left ear, searching for a place to reinsert her tag, but there was no piercing. I strapped the halter to 29's mouth and began to lead her. It was like trying to uproot a tree with a bike chain. Each tug that I gave was useless. I began to put my weight into it, but still, no luck. When I say no luck, I don't mean that 29 wouldn't follow me. I mean that her body showed zero sign of being affected by my body weight whatsoever. Cows are strong creatures, but they're not made of stone. I was perplexed. After 15 minutes of this, I decided that it was useless to continue on, with the clock ever ticking. I could no longer afford to neglect my rounds. I began to walk to the security post to collect my flashlight and get on with the night. I heard a slow trotting. I looked behind me to see that the cow had in fact moved. 29 was now facing me. Not so shy now, I wondered. I turned around and continued walking towards the gate. When I made it halfway through the field, I began to hear the trotting again. But this time, it was louder and much quicker. I smiled to myself. Wish I would have known to walk away sooner. Without turning to face the cow, I walked into the barn and began fumbling with 29's padlock. 3 left, 32 right, 23 left. As the lock clicked open, I heard the floorboards behind me creak. A slow, vocal noise turned to a sickly gurgle. I hope to God whatever you got isn't contagious, I said before spinning around. All color drained from my face as I was greeted with the sight of the 8-foot-tall beast standing before me. On its hind legs, its ears were flapping like a hummingbird's wings. Its head was cocked sideways with one eye focused on me. Its pupils seemed to grow and shrink as it scanned over my entire body. Its lower jaw slowly moved up and down as it began to vocalize again. It began to creep towards me. Its front legs were kicking as it attempted to keep balance, all the while making that same noise. I began to feel lightheaded. I grabbed 29's padlock and made a break for the door. That's when the cow began to stomp behind me. I began to hyperventilate as I sprinted. The rest of the cows were spooked, shaking and jumping around as well. I slammed the door shut and clasped the padlock. A sickening boom shook the entire wall of the barn as 29 began to claw at the door. Oh, the beast croaked before chittering once more. I backed away from the door slowly, its wooden frame bending and contorting at the sheer force behind it. Without another warning, I turned my back to the barn and ran to my car as 29 began wailing and pounding. I never ended up making any rounds that night. Instead, I started my car and left that fucking place in the rear view mirror. I didn't even tell my boss. In fact, I avoided several of his phone calls because I had nothing to say. I figured it would be best if I just quit the easy way. There are certain things in life that back you into corners. Silence forces your hand, you know. That's why I'm writing this now. I still wanted my money. A few weeks later, just before making my 2-hour drive back to college, I stopped by the farm to pick up my final check. My boss wasn't in his office on Tuesdays, so I took advantage of the situation and granted myself access with the key that I had seen him kick under the rug once or twice. After snagging my check and a few Jolly Ranchers, I got in my car and slowly began to drive away. Out of the corner of my eye, a young farmhand standing in the grazing field caught my attention. I lowered my window and said, "Hey kid, stay away from the night shift," but he didn't answer me, nor even look at me. He just continued to stare at the pile of bones before him. As I kept driving, I kept staring at him, and he wouldn't even move an inch. That's when something struck me as odd. His head was tilted sideways, similar to 29's head. I swear, I'm never going back to that farm again. Skinwalkers. Yeah, I grew up on the reservation, and we just follow little rules at night to keep ourselves safe. They are real, 100%. My entire family has seen them. I have many native friends who have family members that are actually part of the Skinwalker community. I mean, I don't know how else to phrase it. Some of these rules are no whistling at night, don't say the name out loud, don't leave windows open on a full moon. One time we had one claw and cry at the side of our house on a full moon, so this is a personal rule that not many other people follow. We also have restricted places we can go at night because they are Navajo worshiping grounds. And for anybody who isn't Navajo, there are places you cannot visit legally because of Skinwalkers, religious practices, and sacred land masses. I do want to point out that, as a side note, most of the time they just look like normal people. They're not what the media makes them out to be. There are some non-native families living in our small town, and Skinwalkers are just a normal part of their life. My mother actually cared for one in the nursing home who didn't fully transition, and there were rules that she had to follow. Some of them are smearing ash on their foreheads before entering the Skinwalker's room, saying a Navajo sacred prayer, and never entering alone. There's also a few wild stories from her experience when it comes to physically caring for one, but it may be too long to add here. Now, most of them look like humans, but when it's not, it's a funky long creature that can take the form of anything with one abnormal thing attached to it, like a goat with 7 legs or a dog without a nose. They want that flesh of yours. So here are more extra tips to survive them. Living in the reservation is like playing a game of what the hell was that noise every night. If someone begins to smell like their flesh is rotting, run. If someone wants to take you to the reservation, politely say no and just move to another city. Don't ever come back, and pray. Pray to whoever you believe in. If you're not religious, pray to a random god, to anybody that comes to mind. Skinwalkers are demonic creatures. But if you're ever in the woods and you hear some whistling, this is a calling sign that the Skinwalker is coming after you. Last Monday, I went on a walk into the woods. I go all the time, whether it's spring or winter. I'm 18 years old, I'm not very tall, and I don't weigh much. So I'm a pretty fast runner too. Sometimes it can get really creepy out there in the woods. My mom and grandparents, they live right down the road by the way, always told me that if I start to feel unsafe out there, I always need to leave. They never said why, but I always figured they were afraid of the coy dogs, and it never seemed that important. I did listen to them though. So Monday afternoon, maybe a bit past 4 o'clock, I left to go walking. I had been out there just 2 days before with no issues, but after walking for about half a mile, the feeling that I was being watched began. I kept walking until I came to the old logging road. It makes for a quick way around the woods, and it also connects to the road that my house and my grandparents' house are on. I was getting pretty tired of hiking through the snow-covered bushes and logs. I still felt like something was watching me, and just a few moments before, I could have swore I saw something moving around from the corner of my eye, so I decided to walk down the logging road instead. As I was walking down it, I heard the sound of chains rattling nearby and started looking around for them. I was thinking maybe it was just chains in a tree blowing in the wind, but I couldn't find any chains, and I stopped hearing it after a second. I kept walking and was getting close to my grandparents' land when I heard the chains again. I stopped walking to look around me and to check to see if maybe it was something I was wearing, my jacket, my necklace, but it wasn't anything on me. I jumped around to double check and maybe looked really stupid, but I knew it wasn't me making the noise. I decided just to go to my grandparents' house and walk back using the actual road. But as soon as I started heading into the woods, I heard something. It sounded like my own footsteps had been in time with a second pair that were maybe about 10 feet away, which made no sense because there had been nothing there just a moment ago. I took another step and heard something step at the same time from behind me. I didn't turn around. I was too afraid, so I acted as if I was going to take another step, but I stopped my foot right above the snow. I wanted to make sure I wasn't going crazy. Behind me, whatever there was, stepped down. I heard the snow crunch, then it moved forward again, quickly. It must have known I figured out it was there. That's when I started running towards my grandparents' land, and whatever was behind me followed. It sounded humanish, and the sound of the chain started up again when it started chasing me. The thing definitely had only 2 legs, and it sounded pretty big. There's a lot of thorn bushes, small trees, and other things that stay around all year, even in the winter. When I ran between them as best as I could, it was just going right through them. I glanced behind me for a second, and all I saw was a really tall, gray, humanoid blur before I looked back in front of me. The final stretch was terrifying. I could hear heavy breathing and chains rattling just a few feet behind me the entire time, and it sounded like it was almost growling. My grandparents' dog was up in the yard near the house and started barking, but he didn't run towards me. He just stayed by the house barking. Then he ran with me to the house when I got close to him. I ran up the door and went inside. The dog came in right beside me, and I slammed the door shut. I didn't hear anything, and I looked out the window, but there wasn't anything there. The dog was leaning onto me and shaking. My grandfather came to the door from upstairs after just a few seconds, and I started crying and told him everything. He became very serious and told me, "Don't think about it. Just forget it ever happened." I tried to ask him why, but he refused to tell me anything. I tried asking my grandmother too, but she didn't say anything, and she changed the subject. I pulled into the bar parking lot and stopped the car. I sat there for a moment, letting the engine idle as I thought about what I was doing. I knew my wife and kids were at home, waiting for me, but I just couldn't bear to face them right now. The thought of spending another evening with them, avoiding the elephant in the room, made me physically sick. I closed my eyes and cursed myself. Everything was going to shit. My wife was pregnant with our 4th child, and I simply wasn't making enough money to support us. Over the past 6 months, our quality of life had slowly declined, and it was becoming harder and harder to explain to the kids what was happening. My wife and I loved each other, but the financial difficulties sprouted endless arguments that could last late into the night. The truth was, I was scared. I didn't know what was going to happen to us. I didn't know how to pull my family out of this terrifying nosedive, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. I couldn't stop thinking about that day when we would be kicked out of our house. I started having trouble sleeping, and my mood worsened. I would find myself snapping at the kids over little things. So instead of taking out my fear and frustrations on my family, I started to drink after work. At first, it was just a beer or two, something to take the edge off. But after a month, I began to stay late, drinking more and more. It was time that I needed to think. It was a few moments of peace. My wife hated my habit, and I didn't blame her. She never argued with me about it. But when I came home reeking of beer and whiskey, she would have this look that said everything. I never really was a drinking man before I fell on hard times. Even in college, I never drank much. Never to the point of being seriously drunk. I just didn't see the point. But now that my life was crumbling before my eyes, I found comfort in drinking. It was a space I could enter and push my thoughts to the edge of my tired mind. And tonight, I needed a drink. Before leaving work, my boss told me that they were conducting layoffs in the coming weeks. He didn't go into detail, but as I sat in my car, I realized that he was unofficially informing me that I would soon be jobless. I felt sick. What the hell am I gonna do? How was I going to provide for my family? Growing up, I never expected this. Why would I? The thought of my kids made me terribly depressed. They depended on me. They looked up to me. How was I supposed to tell them Daddy couldn't pay the bills? I pulled my car door open and forced my mind to settle. I licked my lip. I almost ran into the bar. Music droned somewhere above me as my eyes roamed around the room. Neon beer signs lined the walls and their colors trailed in the air as I sipped my 6 rum and coke. My head was floating above my shoulders, and the conversation around me slurred and streaked like wet paint. I licked my lips and they felt bloated on my face. I blinked lazy and realized I was taking a heavy breath. I shifted on my bar stool and almost fell off. My mind exploded with dizziness and my stomach churned. How many beers had I had before starting the endless rum and cokes? I couldn't remember. The bar was surprisingly full, but I couldn't focus on any individual faces. They piled around me, trying to get in drinks, and I felt like a rock sticking out in the middle of a moving stream. I raised my glass to my mouth and drained the last of its contents. "Hey Jack, you should go home, buddy," the bartender said, leaning towards me out of the pool of mixing colors. "Maybe one more, and then I'll head out," I mumbled, raising my head to meet his gaze. His face swam before me, and I closed one eye to stop it from moving. "I think you're done, buddy. Come on, go home to your family." I could feel darkness swirling around the edge of my vision. I snorted and the bartender shook his head. "Hey, Jack, you want me to call you a cab?" For some reason, I found this incredibly offensive, and I shook my head violently. Piss off. I'll be fine." My head felt like a bloated boulder. I dug into my pocket and pulled out some crumbled cash. I threw it on the bar and stumbled towards the door. I felt like I was walking through a movie scene that I wasn't supposed to be in. People were turning to stare at me, and I was too drunk to register shame, and I shoved some punk kid aside and pushed myself out the front door. The world rocked beneath my feet, and I felt a sudden urge to vomit. I exhaled slowly and dragged my feet towards my car. I was in no state to drive. I grit my teeth and checked my watch. It was after 10. Shit. I banged into my car, still looking at my watch, and let out an angry grunt. I ran my hands over the door until I found the handle and pulled it open. I didn't dare look at my phone and see how many missed calls I had. I sighed as I climbed into the driver's seat. I needed to rest for a moment, settle my head. Then I would drive home and apologize to my wife. I would wait to tell her about the layoffs that are coming. But first, I needed to sleep. I closed my eyes, and darkness rushed me. Hey there, Slick. I pulled my eyes open. Blinding sunlight immediately forced them shut again, and I rubbed my face, trying to clear my mind. To my surprise, I felt alright. In fact, I felt fantastic. I opened my eyes again and sunbeams warmed my face. I was sitting in a sprawling green meadow. Birds chirped overhead, and green grass rustled beneath me, a pleasant breeze chuckling through the air. I was sitting against a tree in a circular clearing, with swaying forest that wrapped around a sparkling pond. It was breathtaking. For the first time in months, I felt peace settle in around me. The blue sky overhead was cloudless, and I closed my eyes as I raised my face to absorb the gentle sunlight. Beautiful, ain't it? I snapped out of my trance and shot a look over to my left where the sudden voice had come from. There was a man, sitting against a tree, not 5 feet from where I sat. He was in his mid-40s and was wearing a tan suit, a silver watch on his wrist, and his sports jacket wrinkled against the bark. His green eyes sparkled underneath the brim of a blue baseball cap. Where am I? I finally asked. The last thing I remember was passing out in my car, drunk off my ass. The man smiled to reveal perfect teeth. Don't worry about that. Ain't no use in it. Just relax and enjoy all this. His accent added to the pleasing atmosphere, and I found myself comfortable around this stranger. My wife. I need to get back to her. And my kids. I said without much conviction. It was just so impossibly gorgeous here. I knew that I needed to get home, but the overwhelming calm I felt made it hard to put action behind my words. They're not going nowhere, Slit, the man said, closing his eyes and taking a deep breath through his nose. Just take a load off and enjoy yourself. I leaned back against my tree and ran my hands through the blades of grass. The woods filled my head with a beautiful scent, a combination of dirt and fresh rain on wood. The pond before me glittered like a mirror, filled with diamonds, and I found myself smiling. Whatever this place was, I never wanted to leave. All my worries seemed so trivial here. The overbearing stress I had felt earlier was gone. By the way, I'm Russ, the man said suddenly from his spot. I turned and saw his eyes were still closed, but he had a small smile. I'm Jack, I answered, watching the silver fish jump from the surface of the pond to snatch a bug. The man chuckled. Oh, I know who you are, Slick. I cocked my head at him. Who are you? What is this place? Russ adjusted the ball cap on his head before answering. I just told you, I'm Russ. And this, he spread his hands. This is just a little slice of peace, buddy. Ain't nothing more. Can I stay here? I asked. Russ snorted, but there was no malice in it. I'm afraid not, partner. That wouldn't be good. This place isn't meant for that. Not anymore. I raised an eyebrow. Not anymore? Before he could answer, a noise echoed in the forest around us. It was distant and low. A single deep note that crawled up the sky and fell upon us. It sounded like the beat of a great drum. Russ pulled his cap, and sat a little straight. "What was that?" I asked him as the sound faded. Russ looked at me, his eyes uneasy. "That's why you can't stay here for very long." The drum sounded again, and again, and again, a constant beat that filled the woods with a single ominous note, and for some reason, it filled me with a creeping dread. "Not good," Russ mumbled under his breath. "What is it?" I stressed, feeling uneasy. Russ stood up, brushing himself off. "It's the whistling man. He's bad news, Slick. You don't want to be around if he shows up." I wasn't following anything he said, and it must have shown on my face because he raised his hands. "Listen, you need to leave," he said as the drum slowly began to grow louder. "Why? What's gonna happen?" Russ waved me off. "Nothing good, Slick. I'll tell you that much. You can come back, but not when he's around." "But where is here?" I sputtered as Russ advanced on me. Before he could answer, the forest filled with a piercing cry, a sharp whistle that cut through the sky and echoed all around us. I slammed my hands over my ears as the deafening note danced across the sun rays and exploded across the meadow. As the wavering echo faded, another whistle followed. This time, lower, sorta haunting, that chilled me instantly. The drum was growing louder, and I thought I felt the earth shiver slightly beneath my feet. Russ turned to me, his eyes wide. "Get out of here. Go." He shoved me backwards and I stumbled, tripping over my feet, and woke up gasping in my car. I immediately opened the door and vomited into the parking lot, a great gush of hot stomach bile and gurgling rum. Tears leaked from my bloodshot eyes as I sat up and wiped my mouth. My head was splitting and I was desperately thirsty. I looked at my watch and groaned. It was a little after midnight. I took a few seconds to collect myself, thinking back on what I had just experienced. What just happened? I could still hear the echoing shrill note of that whistle. Or did I? I ran my hands over my face, the consequences of my nighttime drinking churning my stomach again. How was I going to explain this to my family? What would I tell my wife? I know she was going to be furious. I suddenly wished I was back in the meadow. The serene peace it had offered upon arrival was intoxicating. No worries, no stress, no responsibilities, just warm sun and beautiful, accepting nature. As I started my car, I made a mental choice. I would do anything to go back. And now, I thought I knew how to get there. The next 2 days were a waking hell. As expected, my wife was pissed. She wasn't a woman who yelled or threw things. I almost wish she was. Instead, she turned to ice, barely acknowledging my existence. I try to be extra active with the kids, even taking them out for ice cream. But still, that wasn't enough to get my wife to warm to me. It was the weekend, and every minute seemed like a chore. On the outside, I was super dad, making sure to always wear a smile and engage my kids in conversation and playful fun. None of this made me and my wife closer, and I felt the thirst return to me with a vengeance. I still hadn't told her about the layoffs, and judging by her mood, I wasn't going to tell her until her fury had passed. When Sunday night rolled around and she still wasn't talking to me, that's when I decided that after work the following day, I would return to the bar and get shit-faced again. I needed to see if I could go back to that meadow. I needed it, in the worst kind of way. My own sanctuary of peace. I knew it was the worst thing I could do, but the frustrations of the weekend pushed logic out of my frazzled mind. She didn't fully understand the stress and worry that I was going through. She didn't know the weight I carried every day. It wasn't her fault, but I expected her to cut me some slack. As I slid into bed that night, I licked my mouth and focused on tomorrow. The need was so great, I almost got up and left right there and then. What little reason I still possessed forced my eyes closed instead, and I tried to summon the vision of the meadow. I could almost feel it, waiting for me right behind my eyes. If I focused hard enough, I thought I could smell the greenery swirling through the swaying forest. If I shut everything out, I thought I could hear the frogs croaking at the edge of the water. Was that Russ? I was sure. I had just heard him speaking to me, but it was all just out of reach. For whatever reason, I couldn't quite access that special place. I needed a catalyst. And that's how I found myself slumped over the bar the following night. The day seemed like forever. The clock indifferent to my desperation. On the way to work that morning, I had stopped at the liquor store, but had managed to hold off. My boss didn't say anything to me, which I took as a good sign. My wife still wasn't talking to me, barely looking my way as she got the kids ready for school. I had tried to give her a hug goodbye, but she brushed me off, saying something that she had to finish packing lunches. This sparked an anger in me, and I left the house, clamping my teeth shut so I wouldn't say anything stupid. I knew getting wasted tonight wasn't gonna repair any teetering marriage, but I had been pushed to my limit. If she wasn't gonna forgive me, then what was the point? Her morning coldness had cemented my resolve to go out tonight, and I barely felt any guilt. I justified it in my mind. As I pulled into the bar parking lot, I felt a cool blanket of relief sweep over me. This was where I could let go a little. This was where I didn't have to think about my issues. I tipped the glass to my mouth and sucked the rum off the ice cubes. I hadn't bothered mixing my drinks tonight. I had a destination in mind, and I wanted to get back there as soon as possible. Judging by the way the room swam, I was doing a pretty good job of it too. The bar was empty, and I was relieved for it. A quiet tune played from the retro jukebox in the corner, and I hummed along as I tapped the bar for another refill. The usual bartender was off tonight, Kenny, and I was grateful for it. He had a tendency to cut me off, and I didn't want that tonight. I smiled at the young lady, and I said thanks as she placed the fresh rum in front of me. I was trying my best to maintain my composure. I didn't want to stop drinking until I couldn't see. I drowned half the rum in one swig and felt it slam into my stomach like a derailed train. I burped behind my hand and felt my eyelids swell. I smacked the taste from my mouth and my tongue burned with alcohol. My thoughts had become hard to control, the alcohol filling my mind like a sinking ship. I had been here for 3 hours, and I felt like if I tried to stand, there was no guarantee my legs would obey. I tipped the glass to my lips one last time, and that was enough to cloud my vision with a heavy fog. Blackness pressed in on my sloshed brain, and I ran a hand over my face. It felt like there was a face over my face. I giggled at the thought, but was suddenly overcome with sadness. I blinked a few times and decided it was time. I cashed out with a mumbled thanks to the bartender and very carefully walked out to my car. The world rocked beneath my feet, and the full moon was so bright I had to shut one eye against it. My head felt thick, and every breath tasted like ice and spiced rum. I stumbled to my car and managed to get the door open before collapsing into the driver's seat. I rolled my head back and shut my eyes, a small smile on me. I waited for it to happen. Hey there, Slick. I opened my eyes, and gentle sunlight lit my vision. Stunning greens and blues melted together to form breathtaking beauty, and my senses filled with the peaceful meadow before me. I was back, The dense forest encircling this pocket of paradise swayed gently in the breeze, the leaves rustling together to form a serene soundtrack to the majesty of this hidden nature. The grass was soft beneath me, like cool blades of emerald silk. I ran my hands through it and leaned comfortably against the tree I sat under. The pond before me was captivating in its stillness, a plate of shining silver. I turned and saw Russ sitting a few trees over. His tan suit jacket was balled behind his head, and he leaned comfortably against it. I had to come back, I said. This place. I trailed off, trying to find the words. It's something special, ain't it? Russ grinned, crossing his feet in front of him. Yeah, you got that right. Silence passed between us, and I sighed, my head empty of worries, and was filled with complete tranquility, the secluded isolation adding to calming magic of the meadow, and pleasant birdsong danced between the trees. Again, I was filled with the desire to never leave this place. Everything was just so perfect. It made life seem unfair in comparison. Why were things so hard? Why did misfortune and approaching despair plague my every day? Why couldn't I just stay here, away from all of that, and close my eyes in peace? This was all I needed. You know, Russ said from his spot, as much as I enjoy your company, I worry about you. I looked over at him. Why is that? Russ adjusted his baseball cap. You know why. Don't make me say it, Slick. Can you just let me enjoy the quiet? I said, shutting my eyes. Russ grinned. Of course, but I need you to know something. Before he could continue, a distant drum began to beat. I opened my eyes. Russ pointed out into the woods, towards the noise. That. What about it? I asked softly. Russ stared at me under the brim of his cap. That didn't used to be here. I nodded towards the distant drum. That? The drum? His green eyes bored into my skull. Not just the drum. Him. I stared. Russ's voice dropped to a whisper. The whistling man. You can tell when he's around. When the drum starts. He's looking for you, Slick. And he's never gonna stop. I shifted uncomfortably. Who is he? What does he want? Russ stared out into the forest. Do you really have to ask? I suddenly threw my hands up in frustration. What are you talking about? Before he could respond, the air filled with a shrieking note. A long high whistle that bore into my head like a screaming drill. Swarms of birds erupted from the trees and took flight, escaping the sound. Russ jumped to his feet, with fear all over his face. You better scram, Slick. It sounds like he's close. I don't want to, I shouted, climbing to my feet. I don't care about him. I don't care what he wants. Anything is better than going back to out there. Jabbing my finger towards the sky, Russ approached me as the drum beat grew louder. Another whistle slicing through the meadow like a razor blade. It was the same low note as last time, but despite that, the thought of leaving made me want to weep. I had only just arrived. I couldn't leave yet. I couldn't face what awaited me on the other side. He doesn't have to be here, Russ said urgently. You have to get rid of him. It wasn't always like this. The drum was deafening at this point, and I felt the soil beneath my feet begin to tremble. Russ opened his mouth to speak, but then a new voice erupted from inside the forest. A horrible, deep voice of rage.
Jackie. Where are you, Jackie?
Another series of long whistles followed, cracking the air like a bullwhip. The eyes of Russ went wide, and the blood drained from his face. He took a step and raised his hands to me. Go, go! He shoved me, hard, and I went sprawling backwards, and woke. Nausea tossed my stomach. and I slammed the door open and emptied my gut onto the asphalt. I screamed, wiping my face and pounding on the steering wheel. No, no, I can't be here. Let me go back. Faced once again with my looming, life-ruining problems filled me with absolute panic. The night air filled with indifferent moonlight, and I raised my eyes to the sky. I can't do this anymore. Russ, let me come back. I thought I could feel his presence, a tickle in the back of my head. I focused on it, begging to be swept away to the calming meadow. I didn't care about this whistling man. I didn't care about what he wanted. I couldn't face my family right now. I didn't want to think about work or money. I just wanted to go back. Please, help me. Slamming my fist into the dashboard. Take me back, please. I sat there for a moment, trembling, bloodshot eyes catching focus on everything. Then, nothing. I wiped my face. You can't do this to me. You can't make me stay here. I checked my watch and saw that it is midnight. The last call wasn't for another hour and a half. I licked my lips and ran a hand through my hair. I felt like crap. I knew I probably looked like crap too, but that wasn't gonna stop me. I'm coming back, I said, stepping out of my car, avoiding the puddle of vomit, and I'm not gonna let you send me away this time. My legs wobbled as I carefully made my way back inside the bar. I steadied my breathing and summoned as much willpower as I could. It wasn't easy. My throat burned and my eyes were watering. The world rocked and swayed beneath me, and I gripped my teeth against it. I pushed the bar doors open and slowly made my way back to my stool. I motioned for the bartender and she returned to me. She told me she was surprised to see me back, and I told her my car wasn't working. I told her a friend was coming to give me a lift, and I was just coming back in to kill some time. I spaced out my words and tried my best not to slur. I asked her if she could load me up a beer and a shot. She chewed her lip for a moment, and I could see her thinking, my intoxicated state apparent no matter how good an actor I thought I was. I reached into my pocket and slid her 2 20s, tipping her a wink. The money shattered any moral disputes she had been fighting against, and she quickly cracked the top of a beer. She filled a shot glass and placed it in front of me, telling me to behave myself. I thanked her and assured her that I would. When she turned away, I slammed the shot, gasping at the sudden charge of heat. Whatever edge I had lost from vomiting returned as the rum hit my system. I snatched the beer up and sucked it down, with the last drop sliding onto my tongue. I felt sick, like a soaked sponge left on the counter. I looked around, the room moving and swaying, and saw there were only 2 other people. They were over in the corner, not paying attention, and to my delight, I saw them wave over to the bartender. It looked like they knew her. She shot a quick look at me, and then went over to them. Heart racing, consciousness blinking, I quickly leaned and snatched the half-full bottle of rum from the counter. I chanced to look over my shoulder and saw that my act had gone unnoticed. You can't get rid of me, I mumbled, tipping the bottle to my mouth. You can't make me stay here. I closed my eyes and drank. I didn't stop until everything went dark. I gasped and opened my eyes. Soft clovers tickling my face. I breathed in and sighed, relief running through me. I got to my knees, pulling myself up, and surveyed the meadow. Something was wrong. The sun was hidden behind thick gray clouds, a blanket of dark cotton. I craned my neck and was met with nothing but silent gloom. The woods were quiet, the usual chorus of birds and bugs absent. I could hear my heart hammering in my chest, a rush of beating blood in my ears. I looked to my left, scanning the tree line, and suddenly felt sick as my eyes focused on the scene before me, a deep fear sparking in my chest. The forest was ripped in half, leaving a dark corridor of splintered ruin. It looked like a train had exploded through the woods, obliterating everything in its path. Fractured trees and uprooted underbrush spilled out into the clearing, the remains of nature. "What is going on?" I whispered, voice tainted with fear. I suddenly spotted something in the pond, floating on the surface, and as I squinted to try and make out what it was, my eyes went wide and panic foamed in my throat. "No!" I cried, charging towards the water's edge. I splashed into the shadows at full speed, tripping and then pulling myself up. I shoved lily pads aside and sloshed deeper, the horror before me gaining clarity. "Russ," I said, reaching out for his motionless body. The water was up to my waist as I grabbed at him, pulling him up from under. He was dead weight in my arms, his head rolling against my chest as I dragged him toward shore. Come on, Russ," I begged, gritting my teeth, heart racing, muscles groaning. His eyes were closed, and he didn't move. I finally got us onto the grass where we collapsed in a rush of weight and water. I struggled to regain my breath as I got to my knees and flipped Russ over on his back. My heart sank. His face was a mess of cuts and dark bruises. His clothes were a tangled jumble of torn fabric, brushing strands of wet hair from his face. "Who did this to you, Russ?" I felt like I already knew the answer. I shifted myself over him, fighting panic. I placed my hands over his chest and began CPR. "Please, wake up," I begged, pumping his chest. "Please, you have to wake up. Don't do this, Russ, please." I leaned down and blew into his mouth, tears starting to leak from my eyes. I felt helpless, alone, and filled with overwhelming despair. Why did everything always have to go to shit? Why did I always end up making things worse? Why couldn't I escape the never-ending stream of misfortune? "Please," I said, now beating on Russ's chest. "Please, don't do this." Suddenly, in a rush of urgency, the eyes of Russ snapped open, and he vomited up a great gout of pond water. He coughed and sputtered, emptying his stomach as his body convulsed. I leaned back on my knees, unable to believe it. Relief swept over me, a cackle escaping my lips. You're alive," I cried, gripping the shoulder of Russ as he wiped his mouth and lay on his back. Russ kept his eyes shut, his voice terribly weak. Hey, Slick. You just can't seem to stay awake, can you? What happened to you? Why is everything different?" Russ touched his face before answering. He found me. He found me with you already gone. And he didn't like that." Who? Who did?" I knew the answer. I jerked my head to the woods, the sound of the drum robbing my attention. "No, not now, please." Russ, broken and defeated, said, "He's coming back to finish the job. And if you're here, he's going to get you." The drum was getting loud. I leaned down and grabbed the arm of Russ. What does he want? Why is he doing this? Russ closed one eye and looked painfully at me with the other one. "He's not doing this, Jack. You are." My body went cold, and I said nothing, with my throat going dry. Suddenly, a long rising whistle rose from the forest, first high, then dipping low. The notes bounced off the dark clouds and echoed across the meadow, filling me with dread. Russ tried to sit up, grasping at my arm. "You can't keep doing this," he said, desperation filling his voice. "You can't keep coming here like this. He's gonna kill you." My lips trembled and I looked down at Russ. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I put my hands over my face, sobbing. "Jesus, what have I done?"
"Jackie."
The voice cracked through the air like a clap of thunder, and my heart tripped into my rib cage, crippling fear spreading across my chest. Another shrieking whistle, a sharp drill in my ears, boring into my skull. The ground shook beneath my feet, and I suddenly heard the exploding wood and crashing underbrush from the forest. The sound was distant, but approaching the meadow at a tremendous speed. The whistling man, I whispered. I stood up and faced the tree line. Sweat coated my spine with cold fear, and I licked my mouth with my face pale. Don't let him get you, Slick, Russ said from the ground. Tears ran down my cheeks. I closed my eyes as the drum and constant whistle blasted around me. I could hear trees crashing to the earth as the whistling man rocketed towards me from the woods. I felt helpless and terrified, a lone man against a tsunami of power and devastation. The whistling man exploded from the tree line and into the meadow. Immediately, everything went silent. My heart counted the seconds against my chest. I squeezed my eyelids shut even tighter. I suddenly felt the presence of someone standing directly in front of me, hot breath on my face.
I've been looking for you, Jackie.
Something said, inches from my face. I kept my eyes firmly shut. My knees were shaking, and I felt my bladder release in a rush of terror. My lips quivered, and tears dripped down my chin. Go away, I croaked, my voice a dry rasp. I felt a heavy hand rest on my shoulder, followed by a low chuckle.
Ah, Jack, why would you want that? You brought me here.
I shook my head, squeezing my eyes shut even tighter. No, not anymore. A hand gripped my chin.
Look at me. Open your eyes. Look at what you created.
Please, I sobbed, spittle spraying. Just leave me alone.
Open your eyes, Jackie.
Weeping, I slowly pried my bloodshot eyes open, and the breath rushed from my lungs in a haunting wave of horror. I was staring into my own face. The whistling man grinned as the recognition twisted my face with shock.
You see, there ain't nothing to be afraid of. This is just who you are.
I took a step back, shaking, trembling. No, this isn't who I am. He chuckled and took a step closer.
Yes, it is, Jack.
I violently shook my head. No, I'm a good person. I'm nothing like you. The whistling man suddenly stepped ahead and grabbed me by the throat, with his grip impossibly strong.
Time we finally settled this, Jackie.
Just leave me alone, I said as his grip tightened around my throat. He leaned into me, grinning, and squeezed darkness into my vision.
It's over, Jack.
Stars swam around me as the world began to fade. With one last gasp, I whispered, please, just let me go home. Right as I was about to pass out, a blackness ate my eyes. The grip around my throat was removed. I gasped and fell to my knees, the metal rushing back into focus, color and clarity, realigned as I coughed and sputtered, clutching my aching throat. I looked up in a relieved confusion, and my eyes went wide. Russ was holding the whistling man from behind, one arm wrapped around his throat in a chokehold. He had his other arm over the whistling man's face with his hand shoved inside his mouth, gripping his upper jaw with commanding strength. Sweat stood out on the face of Russ, his eyes two coals of burning fire. His voice crackled like a blazing furnace. He doesn't need you anymore. Leave him alone, goddammit. The whistling man growled around Russ's hand, fury shaking him.
I am him.
The neck muscles of Russ strained as he began to pull the whistling man's head backwards, howling with authority. Nah, any more. Screaming with exhausted effort, Russ ripped the whistling man's head back between his shoulder blades in an explosion of blood and bone. I heard a sickening pop as his spine shattered, blood gushing from the now lifeless mouth. Gasping, Russ pulled his bloody hand from the whistling man's jaws and shoved the dead man to the ground. He looked at me, chest heaving. You okay, Slick? Shock rooted me to the ground, complete disbelief freezing me where I sat. Crying, I got into my feet and embraced him, weeping onto his chest. Russ stroked my hair and let me cry into him, his heart beating against my chest. Thank you so much, I wept. I'm so sorry. I'm so fucking sorry for doing this. Russ pulled me away and took me by the shoulders. You're a lot stronger than you think, Jack. Never forget that. I wiped tears from my face, unable to stop more from coming. I won't forget. I promise I won't. Thank you so much. Russ nodded. Now, are you ready to go back? I nodded, sniffling. Russ closed his eyes. Good luck to you, Slip. I'm proud of you. And with that, he pushed me backwards, and I awoke with a start, on the bar floor. Faces were looking down at me, a blur of color and noise. I blinked and then everything rushed into focus. It was the bartender and the two men she had been talking to. Their faces were filled with concern, and I realized they were talking to me. Hey, you okay? One of the men asked, getting down on one knee and helping me sit up. Relief washed over me in a suffocating wave as I grit my teeth as my eyes filled with tears. I smiled up at the three of them, my head clear and focused, all traces of a hangover gone. Alright, thank you. I must have slipped in my stool and bumped my head is all. The bartender told me they had heard a crash and looked over to see me lying on the floor, unmoving. She said it had taken them a little bit to wake me, almost to the point of calling an ambulance. I assured them I was okay, climbing to my feet and brushing myself off. My calm demeanor clearly confused them, to the point of not pressing me further. I thanked them for their concern and told them I was going to call a cab and go home. After making sure I was really okay, they told me to take care of myself. That's when I smiled and said, I will. That was 3 years ago. It's been a long, hard road since that night, but I'm doing well. It took months for my wife to get over that horrific act of selfishness, but I have proven to her since then that I will never be that man again. I can't believe she didn't leave me, and it fills me with eternal gratitude. I spent this time proving to my family that they can rely on me. I have shown them my resolve, and we've grown closer, making it through these horrible early months. But we're stronger now, and life has begun to show promise of happiness. I did end up losing my job, but my boss was able to secure me another with a sister company. It was an act of kindness that I wasn't expecting, and it furthered me down the path to positivity. It's taken 3 long years to rebuild my life, and it's been 3 years since I had a drink. I'm not gonna lie to you and tell you it was easy, because it wasn't. It was hard, impossibly hard, even after everything I went through. There were days I almost gave in to temptation, but I would open up to my wife during those times of weakness, and she helped me through them. She gave me hope that I could change, but I had to face what I had become first, and I will never go back to being that man. I'll find my own way to the meadow. I know it's out there, waiting for me, the path to its peaceful serenity, growing more clear the longer I walk the road of recovery. And even though I come so far and made so much progress, I'm still filled with fear, because I know he's out there, waiting for me. He'll always be there, the whistling man.